Public policies, otherwise known as government policies, can be divided into different types, which are distributive public policy, redistributive public policy, regulatory public policy, constituent public policy, as well as substantive public policy. In this episode, we'll discuss each of these types of public policy. Welcome to Kano Talks. This is where we talk about everything relating to public administration. With this podcast, we aim to clarify and simplify some of the aspects of public administration, public management, and public finance. So, if you are interested in the fields of public administration, political science, public finance, and the overall management of the public sector, including the running of government, then make sure you follow us or subscribe to our podcast show on the audio streaming app of your choice. As indicated, in this episode, we'll discuss the 5 types of public policy. This is a follow-up on our previous episode on public policy. But before we get into the various types of public policy, it's important that we define what public policy is. Public policy is a set of laws, guidelines, and actions decided and taken by the government in order to work in favor of the public. In simple terms, it is government's plan of action. According to Professor Thomas Dye, public policy is essentially whatever governments choose to do, or not to do, on any particular matter concerning the public. To understand more on public policy, we suggest you listen to episode 2 of our podcast. So, how many types of public policies do we have? Although political scientist Theodore J. Lowy proposed 4 types of public policy, namely distributive, redistributive, regulatory, and constituent, some authors and scholars have argued for a 5th type, being substantive public policy. We will now briefly discuss each of these types. Public policies, which are focused on using government funds to pay for public goods or services, are distributive in nature. A distributive public policy may directly impact only a certain group of individuals or organizations, but generally provide for the common good. This means that these policies are specially planned for a particular segment of society, and are focused on solving societal issues, such as health services, public welfare, etc. Examples of distributive public policies are equal job opportunities, allocation of educational grants, farm assistance programs, just to list a few. The next type of public policy is redistributive public policy. This is when government policies are developed and implemented with the main aim of redistributing government funds or other resources to benefit a particular group within society. The main aim of these policies is to transfer or reallocate costs, benefits, and other resources from one collective group to another, with the intention of redesigning or modifying distribution of resources to effect social and economic change. Examples of redistributive public policies are welfare policies, policy on land ownership, progressive taxation policies, to list just a few. The next type of public policy is a regulatory public policy. This is when a government endeavors to achieve its objectives through the use of regulations, laws, and other instruments in order to deliver better economic and social outcomes, and thus enhance the life of citizens and improves the operating environment for businesses. In other words, regulatory public policy is when a government introduces laws and regulations to clearly define the boundaries of what is allowed versus what is not allowed, by placing restrictions on what individuals, businesses, or organizations can do, for the purpose of protecting the overall economic and social welfare. Examples of regulatory public policies are policy on environmental protection, policy on consumer protection, policy on migration, to name just a few. The next type of public policy is a constituent public policy. These are public policies that relate to how government is structured. These policies essentially relate to the creation, or the improvement, or even the reconstruction of governmental institutions or organs. including assigning or reassigning powers and authority to such government institutions or organs. Examples of constituent public policies will include creation of new organs of state, changing in the rules of Parliament, assigning new powers to a state organ. The last, but certainly not least, is substantive public policies. We can explain these types of policies like this. If public policy refers to what government chooses to do or not to do, then substantive policies address what governments should actually do. These are the policies which are concerned with the general welfare and development of the society, such as the provision of education and employment opportunities, economic stabilization, law and order enforcement, etc. These policies do not cater to any particular or privileged section of society, and have to be formulated, keeping in mind the goals and characteristics of the Constitution and the principles of the state, as well as the current and moral claims of the society. In conclusion, public policies can be regarded as decisions taken by the government in order to achieve certain goals and objectives for the welfare of its people and the running of its country, as well as the country's position on global issues. It is therefore important to understand the various types of public policies, because these are ultimately decisions made by those in power to affect nearly every aspect of our daily lives, including education, healthcare, transportation, the economy, our safety, and national security, etc. We've come to the end of today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. And if you really liked our content, don't forget to share this episode with your friends and family, and tell them about our podcast. We'd also appreciate if you could rate and review this episode and our podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode. Join us again next time for another episode. Until then, check out our other episodes. Kano Talks. This is yet another informative and educational audio episode, proudly brought to you by Kano Consultants.